guys, I'm super excited for this. If you know me, you know how much I love my indie comics. And I, once in a while, have the opportunity to talk to artists and writers within the industry. It's always a wonderful conversation because there's so much that we can do with indies. There's so many different directions you can take things in that you can't do with a lot of the bigger, more mainstream comic publishers. And I had the opportunity to sit down with somebody who is known. You may recognize her from Inkblot, from Radiant Pink, from Frank Miller's Pandora. I'm talking about Emma Kubert. Very popular name, lot of background with that, and we're going to get into those things. But without further ado, let's talk about Stoneheart #1 with Emma Kubert right now. Emma, thank you so much for joining me today. I really sincerely appreciate this. I'm sure you're very busy, and I just wanted to start off with a thank you for coming out today.
Well, thank you for having me. That's all I got to say.
Thank you so much. So, for those that have not gotten to meet you before, Emma, Emma Kubert, you do have a comic lineage as well.
Yes.
You come from you come from a very distinguished line. Your grandfather Joe, and your dad is Andy,
Mhm.
correct?
Yep.
And I'm trying to make sure I'm not getting any of these wrong. And your uncle is Adam.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't make sure I had it the right way because I was pretty sure. I'm just like I remember everybody, and I got it in the right order though. So that's a big family business being in arts in general too, right?
Definitely. I mean, I think the biggest thing about it is my grandpa really wanted to make it accessible for anyone to learn comics, like not just, his own family, but
Mhm.
anyone in general. And he realized that there wasn't really a school for that. So that's why he created the Kubert School.
Mhm.
Um, and I actually teach there now too. So I went to school there and now I teach there. I just came home from
Wow,
class there today.
awesome! Wow, holy cow!
So
So this is a real family business as far as things go, from not just you know sharing your art with the world, but also helping people share theirs
yeah, I
ultimately.
mean, that was really the biggest thing about it, and that's what really drew me to teaching in general, teaching and art and all that stuff is that we don't like to gatekeep knowledge. We like to spread it so that everyone can enjoy the medium of comics. So
Yeah.
that's really what it's all about, and that's what I'm all about, and my family is too. And I'm really proud to be a part of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when it came growing up as well too, I can imagine this much family involvement in like comics and in arts in general. I mean I'm if I remember correctly, your mother is a watercolor
Yeah,
painter.
it is. Yay! I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yes. So at the same time too, I'm sure art was encouraged, but I know like I have a teenage daughter, right? And I can encourage her to do things all day. And
Mhm.
she just looks at me like, yeah,
Well, yeah, that's basically
okay, dad.
how I would look at my parents too, so I get it. But I think the main thing with my parents growing up is that it wasn't just showing like, you can succeed in the arts, but it's also that the arts are a legitimate job that you have to work at every single day. I grew up like literally the town over from the Kubert School. My dad taught there. My mom was the one to create the Kubert art store there. So I basically spent my entire childhood at the school. But one of
Wow.
the biggest things that I found is that I loved art and I loved being a part of an artistic community, but at the time, I didn't necessarily like comics. And it was
Hmm.
because I was basically growing up, like, I grew up in the early 2000s around that time. And so during that time, there wasn't as much diversity in comics, especially with
No,
characters
agreed.
themselves.
Hmm.
So that was something that like immediately turned me off from comic books because all I would really see was like Batman and Superman and even seeing Wonder Woman who wasn't really a relatable character to, like a chubby 12-year-old girl trying to do art. So that was just one of the factors that just turned me off from the medium altogether. I wish I did more exploring in the comics industry, but that was kind of how it was for me. But
Yeah.
what I did find, like what I did like was art in general. So I grew up loving anything that was really creative. Like I loved not only fine art, but I love theater, I liked music, I liked all of those different things. But the thing that stuck with me was actually animation. And I grew up absolutely, again, early 2000s, grew up in the golden age of TV animation.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so
Absolutely.
yeah. And so that was what I absolutely loved. And the reason why I loved it so much was because these stories were so good and they were good for everyone. It wasn't just for one person. Like everyone was going to see a Pixar movie in movie theaters, It wasn't just children, it was for the adults and anyone in between. And
Hmm.
I saw that, like a story about toys can touch the hearts of a 6-year-old and a 60-year-old. And that was the kind of stories that I wanted to tell. Did I know the medium? No. I had no idea how I was going to tell these stories. Had no idea. But at that time, I realized I was just like, animation might be my, path to that. So when I, graduated high school, I actually went to college for animation before I went back to the Kubert school. And then I realized that animating really sucks unless you really absolutely love it. If you absolutely love sitting there drawing the same frame over and over again, but moving it a little bit, that's great. That's amazing. And I applaud you. But me, I do not have the attention span for that.
And just even editing video and things of that nature, just the layers and the piece and the part and the
It
like
sucks the
Adobe.
life out of you a little bit. And that was
It
kind of
does.
yeah. And that was kind of the moment that I realized that I was just like, okay, this might not be for me, but I was looking at the pre-production part of it. I was looking at storyboarding, concept art, character design. And the college that I was going to, if I were to kind of move around my curriculum, I would have had to start all over, and the scheduling just wasn't doing it for me. So at that time, I basically called my dad and I was just like, Dad, I think I gotta go home. I think I gotta go to the Kubert school. And you know what he said? He was like, it's deja vu because he did the same thing when he went to college, except he only lasted
Really?
months while I lasted 2 years.
Oh, well, kudos. You did what dad couldn't do. You did what dad could. You hung in there longer.
I got half a college education.
I can absolutely relate. I left college early because there was nothing that was being offered that I was really into at the time. I was into computers and I'm
Mhm.
older, so it wasn't. They didn't have a lot of things back then for it, so I can totally understand. So when it came to then leaving and going back to the school, like you said, you got turned on to more of the pre-production side of things and like
Yeah.
storyboarding. And was that when you kind of like you saw that storyboarding starting like this looks a lot like what my dad, my uncle, and my grandpa does? Was it just kind of like one of those things where you're just like,
Yeah.
oh God? Was it that moment where it clicked and you were like,
You
oh
literally
no?
you pinpointed it, but it didn't click until basically, like, my 3rd year at the Kubert school. So, even going in it's a 3-year program, so it's really tough, actually. It's, a school that you go to classes, you have 2 classes a day, 5 days a week. It's a trade school, so you're constantly working, like, 10 to 12 hours a day. And so I go, and first year, I'm like, okay, I'm still gonna be a storyboard artist, like, I'm still gonna be in that industry, but I'm gonna try to get my basic drawing skills a little bit better, my storytelling skills. Second year, I'm like, okay, I can see the cool part about this comic stuff. Harley Quinn is getting big. I'm seeing more diversity, and I'm thinking maybe I could be a part of that because it's opening up a little bit more. And then third year happens, and one of our assignments actually it's from my teacher, Tom Mandrake. He was one of my teachers, and he gave us an assignment of us creating our own stories, like our own concept art for our own stories. And I felt like I was just like pulling teeth out of my mouth. Like I was just like, how can I even come up with these ideas? And then that was the start of Inkblot. So I started to develop Inkblot back then. It was called Willowbrook, but I started to develop that while I was in school. And then I started to create things that I really liked and I could look at and be like, my younger self would definitely read this. And I was just like, maybe that's more of my path. Maybe it's more of my path to create stories meant for my younger self when I didn't have those when I was younger. And that's just kind of the path that I've been taking since then, and it's been really working out.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I mean, in Inkblot successful. That's been that was my first exposure to you getting into that book, and that's kind of when this came around. We have the I do these incoming indies, and I do other indie shows, starting to build more on Instagram. But one of them's with my friend Mark, and he was just like he had already picked some other book. I can't remember what it was. I think he was going to do Clear this week, and he was just like, well, that's been out actually for a little bit on the smaller press things. It's like I'm going to do Stoneheart. I'm like, no, I already got Stoneheart. I'm like, I read it. Like I've been there. I've read the other books. Like I know for a fact I can, and then I already called dibs. I already filmed it, and like, and I sent him a screenshot. Like, and I already reached out to Emma to try and talk to her. Okay, so like, you are not getting Stoneheart. And he was just like, okay, 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 okay. Sorry, I'll find a different one. I'm like, yeah, you're gonna find a different one, bro. Dibs, dibs. No, and I got to read it this morning, and you know, I'll take this as the opportunity to segue into this particular story as well. Excuse me, I gotta move my frame on my camera. It's trying to still focus on my face.
Mhm.
So Stoneheart, how did and I'll get into my parallels that I feel in it as I read it, as I read it, excuse me, and as we discussed it a little bit. But how did Stoneheart come to be? Because you've obviously been able to be creative early in your career and be successfully creative. A lot of people are very creative and don't get to be successfully creative. But then to come out with your own written and art and cover.
I know.
I mean, was this like your thesis statement for school kind of thing? Like, okay, you got to do this whole
A
thing yourself.
little bit. That's kind of how I feel. Like it's a little bit like I'm just literally putting out my most vulnerable self out onto the comic book shelves. And
Yeah.
it's so Stoneheart really came about um, during a time when I was trying my best to be in this industry and really start my career. And I think at that point, it was starting to snowball, but something mentally was happening with me, and I was falling into a really bad place while all of these really good things around me were happening. And I feel like a lot of people have been through that where it's just like you just don't understand why you feel the way that you feel when you're in this space. And, people are looking around you and they're just like, why aren't you grateful? Why can't you, like, just like where you're at? Or it, basically, yeah, basically, why can't you just be happy? And it's one of those feelings that you have to dive deeper into that feeling in order to really understand why and to understand how to fix it, which is
Mm-hmm.
a whole other um ball game right there. So when I started to write Stoneheart, it was really just me kind of putting my own mentality at the time onto paper. Like I kind of felt like, my career was kind of starting, but I was living with my parents. I felt very stuck in my life. I didn't like where I was, aka I was living in California and I didn't really like it there. I'm a Northeast girl, I'm not gonna lie. I don't blame anyone for liking California, but that's just not my vibe.
I feel it. I get it. I'm
And
in Michigan, so it's it's similar weather wise. We don't have the cool metropolitan areas, but
but
Chicago's close.
it's same kind of seasons,
Oh
like,
yeah, I'm wearing a hoodie right now for a reason, right? Like this is warm weather,
yeah,
in
this
my
is the
house.
weather, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I feel that.
So that was kind of the culmination of this, but the other factor that kind of played into that was that I was realizing that I felt this feeling before. And I felt this kind of feeling when I was younger, and it felt worse when I was younger. So when I was growing up, I feel like I'm like just missed that mental health movement and the Me Too movement and all of the social movements that happened basically before the pandemic. I feel like
Mhm.
I just missed those. So when I was thinking about this stuff, I was remembering me feeling actually this way before. It felt familiar. And that's where the first issue comes in, is that feeling of getting your memories wiped, but having that emotion and feeling still inside you. And you have to really discover where that's coming from and where you're going to go from there.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I saw a lot of and this is something we spoke about briefly when we were talking at the beginning, like looking at the character, and there's the flashbacks, and there's the kind of exile and having to go out on your own and make your own moves, and you get to this place that you feel should be super cool, but you're not. It's not your vibe, man. This outside of this little world, outside of that safe space of in this case blacksmithing, or art,
Yeah,
very very much so, outside of that little place, it's dangerous.
it's
People
it's a
suck.
it's a scary
People
world out
suck.
there.
There's a-holes everywhere, and and you just and you just say to yourself, and like, is it even worth going outside each day? And everybody says, like, get out of the house, go do these things. You're like, no, I'm happy here.
Yeah,
This is good. Like, don't,
that's
please don't make me go outside.
yeah, I'm an indoor cat too.
Yeah. And also too, she was going to apprentice to be a blacksmith as well. Is this a similar kind of parallel as well, where you're just like, okay, I need to, I've obviously had my family all of my life to pull from, and is that kind of like school and having these different teachers, is that a similar kind of parallel, or is there maybe something I'm missing with that?
That's gonna be a huge theme of Stoneheart, is learning not only through the people around you, but also through the mentorships that you acquire, but also make as well. And that is a huge influence on my life in general, is having great mentors to, you know, not take after, but like learn from, and then kind of apply that to my own path and
Yeah,
see where I can make with it that way. And that's
yeah,
really where that does come from, is that Shade is looking to learn. She's looking to grow. She's looking to practice the thing that she loves to do, but she also has to be a person, and she also has to get out of that forge, and she also has to deal with the actual things that are very serious and that are happening right beneath the surface. And that's really the whole thing, because we can all dive into the things we love head on, but if we're not dealing with ourselves as humans at the same time, then how are we going to truly love those things? How are we going to truly be happy with our lives? And that's
Yeah.
really what it is.
This is her great learning that balance and taking those um there's an old proverb that, a wise man learns from the mistakes of others while a fool only learns from their own.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe mentorship, obviously apprenticeship, with that same thought. My dad's a master carpenter by trade, so he grew up in apprenticeship programs, like, from Great Britain. Ever since I was a little boy, he was British family, and
Mhm.
to the main thing is over there, and I can kind of see this relation is in Europe, which is different to the United States, in Britain particularly. My father's a master cabinetry maker,
Mhm.
right? So to do that, though, he had to get his master's in carpentry, but he also had to get a master's in masonry and electrical and
Oh,
plumbing. And because to get your master's in any one thing, you actually have to know them all, right? So
yeah.
you have to, you can be great at a thing but never be able to build a house. He has to be able to build the house and put the cabinets in it, as far as they're concerned, to be a master cabinet maker. And versus here in the United States, where you just got to learn that one thing, and
Yeah.
that's your thing, and that's
Yeah.
all we want you to worry about. That's it, right? But it's that well-roundedness that comes from, I feel like, that kind of a program, to learn these other things around you, because they can all be applied to your art. You learn those things to then, well, now I know how to, like, incorporate lights into a cabinet, or where they can be in different kinds of rooms, or what kinds of sealants they need, things of that nature. um
Mhm.
I Learning those other traits can be very impactful. And that's what another question that I had too, with your mother being a painter. And yes, I totally watched your interview on Sci-Fi Wire. And I loved Batgirl. You did a wonderful job while you were painting there. And watercolor is one thing that's always absolutely eluded me. But is that something that you find yourself um wanting to incorporate, like, I don't know, when did you know that you wanted to incorporate that, especially into this medium of comics, particularly because watercolor is not necessarily new, but it
Mhm.
is not as common in comics and art, in my opinion.
I would say that it's not just watercolor that I want to apply to comics, but it's all different kinds of art forms that are not the standard looking comic book.
Hmm.
And I think, with Inkblot, we were able to really like pull off a style and a story that's very different, but the look of
Hmm.
it is traditional comics because it's called Inkblot, you gotta have it inked. But when I was creating Stoneheart, one of the main things that I knew that I wanted it to be was I just wanted it to be penciled. I didn't want it to be inked, and part of
Hmm.
that came from learning different art forms growing up, like having my mom be a watercolor painter as I've growing up showed me that there are so many different avenues of art that I can go down, and just like what you were describing, um learning everything that I could about creativity, like, again, from, like, theater to cooking to anything that I absolutely love, it applies to my art as well. So it helps me decide what a specific story is gonna look like, how is it gonna feel, and every decision that goes into it. And so when I created Stoneheart, and I literally have a page up like on my other screen right now that I'm looking at for like issue 5 right now. And and like it just kind of it clicked to me that I wanted to portray this in a medium that I was personally comfortable with.
Hmm.
And I would say one of the biggest factors of that inspiration was the first graphic novel that I really took to. And not to be biased, but it was my grandpa's. And but it was his
Easy access, I'm sure. You know, is something that you could find and come across easily and didn't have to go hunting too hard for, I hope.
just a little bit. But it was my grandpa's graphic novel, Yassel. And that graphic novel, it wasn't like the traditional superheroes. It wasn't like super war comics or anything like that. It was a real personal historical fiction story that he
Mhm.
wanted to portray of his people, of him, and of just the feeling of where that side of my family comes from. And at I think I read it when I was like it was definitely earlier than high school, but I like reread it in high school because I remember I did it for a specific class too. That graphic novel was the thing that really stuck in my head all of these years. It's my absolute favorite as well, and it's because it's such a personal and raw kind of story that
Yeah.
really just sung to me. And I knew Stoneheart was going to be that way, so I wanted to portray that. Obviously, it's not Yassel because my grandpa's up here and, I can't reach that level, but but this was my
You
own.
have a long life ahead.
We'll
You
see.
have a long life ahead.
Well,
Despite how the day feels sometimes,
um,
lots of great things ahead.
it's just so funny, like, my dad says the same thing. He'll always say that, like, "My grandpa's up here, so he'll always be here, and I'll always feel like I'm here no matter what." Like, it doesn't even matter. But with Stoneheart, I knew that pencil was always something that I love to do. I love to draw in pencil. It's my favorite medium out of any art tool there is. So having it in pencil was really, really important to me. And exploring different mediums in general is really important to me too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, and just to say this, I've never gotten to meet your grandpa, your dad, or your uncle. So being the first Kubert I've met, you are here and they are
Oh,
here
thanks.
right now. Okay, so 100%
I'll
Emma, coolest Kubert and best
never,
one there is.
I'll never.
So I'll send you the clip. You can send it like, just by the way, guess what? You aren't the coolest, Joe. Thanks, Grandpa. Sorry. Um, no, I mean, and coming with these kinds of tales and coming with stories like this, I've always felt that indie comics have the most important place in modern as a medium right
Yeah,
now because of the different kinds of stories it can tell. And it's not to say that Marvel or DC is not capable, but they are so embedded in just so much baggage of stories and predisposed characters of, so much history and so many things that they're on tracks. They're kind of stuck on those tracks. And I feel like an indie comic, what is wonderful about it, is the fact that there are so many more stories to tell that those two don't really have the opportunity to do,
yeah,
with their character sets and their world building in the way in which they are. And whether it's Image or it's Aftershock or it's, self publication, and you're going at it via Kickstarter and doing it yourself, I feel like the best storytelling, in my opinion, and I apologize, I don't mean to offend anybody, but it's truly happening right now in indie comics. And it's something that I feel comfortable getting my daughter interested in. She's 16 years old. She's gone through a lot of things, currently on chemo. This is like third time through. It's hard being a teenager, going through all those things previously, going through them again now, and
yeah,
like relating to the outside world, and having that acceptance, and not getting in those things. And so, like anime, manga, indie comics, very important to her because those are a lot of stories. she can gather from, right?
Yeah.
And like reading something like this is is something that I also feel excited to, now that I've finished with it, especially, is like hand to her, like, I think you'll enjoy this, I
Well,
think you'll like this.
and
And
to be honest, that's who I wanna create for, is I want to
yeah,
create for young women and girls who have not felt related into this medium like I didn't when I was younger. So I'm hoping that that is the case, and it seems like it is, and I'm really hoping. I hope she likes it.
I hope she will too, because I enjoyed it. That's always the worst, is when we disagree about something we like. She's like, uh Dad, it was okay. Like, what do you mean it was okay? It was fantastic. You know I'm not
So
supposed to be too excited about things with my dad now.
it's okay. I'm the same.
But I tell you what, but no, this is so. Give us a little bit of an idea of where Stoneheart will be going as a kind. I don't want to, don't you don't need to give anything away, but that elevator pitch of why not only do we give this book that chance? Why do we keep reading for these next few episodes? Because I'm very interested to see what happens at the end. But again, I want people to buy the book, so I'm not going to go talking about it. Um, so I want them to go get it, but I feel like it's a very good cliffhanger with the way it dropped off here on this first
Yeah.
issue. But for that arc, you were looking at issue 5 right now.
So
This
I have 6 issue arcs. I am gonna tell you that I have everything planned. Like
oh,
everything is planned out. And I want to be very upfront about that so that people know to expect my comic.
so we're gonna get to see yours each month. It's not gonna be like one of those things. We got it for 2 months, 6 month
Absolutely not.
hiatus.
Absolutely not. I am not a hiatus kind of girl. I think the only time that I went on a hiatus is with Inkblot, and it's just because so that I can do these other projects and
Mhm.
then go back to Inkblot because I absolutely love Inkblot. But with Stoneheart, literally curated this story so that it could be 5 arcs of 6 issues each. And each arc is going to take place in a different setting.
Mhm.
And you're basically going to follow Shade down the rabbit hole of her own undoing. So you're going to see things culminate and I don't want to give anything away either, but you're going to see the world, the journey, the adventure
The
entirely culminate around her, the people that she's with. Yeah, she's gonna go all around that
Okay,
map.
because I was looking at it, I'm just like, there's a lot of places on here I did not read about in the comic right now, so I'm guessing this is going to be
Yeah.
basically hot, like a heat map of her journey,
Yep.
of where she's going to be and where she's going to be going.
Yep. And that's basically what I have is that, you know, eventually she's gonna have to confront all of the things that have been culminating inside of her, whether it's the voice and the feelings that she has and the world that she has to confront that's surrounding her. And it's going to culminate into something huge. I promise you, it's huge.
Awesome.
And I have
Awesome.
it, like, literally planned out every single issue. I know exactly what's gonna happen. I have up to issue 6 done, so
Hmm.
I'm basically just rolling out my drawing since, now the first one came out. The next month, you're gonna get another one, and you're gonna get another one until, either no one's reading it anymore or,
No, say that.
it's done.
That's good. That's good though. And a lot of times too, I don't feel like everybody necessarily knows where the story is going to go. You've got a great premise, and then all of a sudden it's just like, maybe it'll never end. Who knows? Like having an entire arc is nice to hear, because that's the other thing I like about indies as well too, is the ability to have an entire story and enjoy just that entire story. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be just a small arc on now what it's going to be in every a monthly into perpetuity. Everybody wants to be popular, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Spin-offs are always cool, but eventually it just turns into kind of one of those things where it's you maybe lose the story or you lose the meaning because it just keeps on going and going and going and iterating and iterating and iterating.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to do with Stoneheart is that Stoneheart and the other comic that I'm working on, Frank Miller Presents Pandora, is
Hmm.
they are linear stories. So you're going to get issue after issue, and it's just going to be a continuation of that one story. The first arc is an entire story of, Shade at Light Spring Canyon trying to figure things out.
Hmm.
But then eventually she's going to go on to bigger and larger adventures and dangerous situations, and she's going to meet more and more characters. I can even give you a little bit of a tidbit of the arc 2 that's going to deal with pirates.
Oh,
So
I dig
that
it.
I'm hoping that entices people to keep buying my comic. and,
I'm
and
well,
that's
we're a
basically.
long lineage of pirates. I'm down with it. I'm down with it. Um, and another question too. These are very fantasy, rooted um, comics as well. Like not just like the superhero or the person. Just cut. This is a very fantasy laden world.
Yes.
We've got like we've got paladins, we've got our different magicians, we've got lots of um uh what kind of influenced the world that we find.
The world in general was influenced by a lot of different fantasy that I love and that I grew up with, because
Hmm.
what I would say is that I grew up with fantasy. I didn't grow up with superheroes, even though
Hmm.
that's what I was surrounded by. so
Hey man, I get it.
so like even just relaying that, like my favorite anime growing up was Inuyasha. High
Oh,
fantasy,
okay.
you dive right into the story, and you're there for, 8 plus seasons. Not that way, but but I mean, I want to explore the fantasy genre in comics, and it's because it's just one of my favorite genres, and that's really all there is to it. I do love superheroes, I do love other genres as well, but fantasy really lies in my heart, like so deeply. And I would say, like the world that Athea is, it's really based off of a lot of different mangas that I've read.
Hmm.
It's also based off of, I grew up with Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and all of those that kind of culminate together in a
Hmm.
way. So I wanted to create basically my own high fantasy like that
That's
kind
awesome.
of coincided with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm so happy for you. This is really awesome. I totally enjoyed this book as I was reading it earlier today. Like I said, I didn't have anything on pre-order. I went right to the shop, went to the LCS this morning, grabbed a couple copies, got a couple copies for people that will be watching this later on for them to do. I don't know. We're gonna figure out something, but you'll get to win. Um get them shipped out to you. But for those that want the opportunity to see you, are you going to be at any conventions this year?
So I'm definitely going to be at MegaCon in Florida, Orlando, Florida this year. The other conventions, I'm not positive just yet,
Okay.
but you can find that out if you follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or I'm also on TikTok. I do a lot of process drawings on there, so that's fun. Um, and
Awesome.
that's usually where I, announce this stuff. So at Emma Kubert, very easy to find.
That
um,
is good. I'm upset right now because I'm going to C2E2. The worst thing to happen to comics this year was
yeah,
C2E2 and MegaCon on the same
that's
weekend,
true.
man.
That's true.
Oh, oh, I was so disheartened, and I knew the answer to that too, because I was just like, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could actually get a couple of these books autographed? Actually, after I get to talk to her, so I looked on C2E2. I'm like, she's not there. Like, oh man, is she gonna be at MegaCon after I just committed to C2E2? I'm like, oh, she's at MegaCon. Well, Emma, thank you so much for joining me. This was much longer than I asked you for. I asked you like, oh, can I just talk to you for 10 to 15 minutes? It's been at least 50 with the warm up, so I'm going to shut up and just sincerely thank you for coming out and joining me for this conversation and sharing your gift with us. And you know, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I think this was a great conversation, and I always block out more time for these interviews in case that happens. So don't
Well,
worry.
now that I know you're blocking out time, guess every time she drops another whole different story, who's going to be like, hey, it's me again. Guess what?
It's like, can we
Um,
talk?
Goodness gracious. But yes, for all those who do not know, probably the most adorable thing I have seen in comics in quite some time is this little guy. I saw this. I'm like, oh, it's like a. At first, when it comes out, it's like a goat. I'm like, no, it's like a dog. No, I'm like, what the hell is this adorable little thing? I may need a stuffed animal version of this. It's
And then
ridiculous.
Shayde
Coco.
says the same thing. She's like, "What are you? I like you."
This is up for most adorable drawn creature I've seen in quite some time in comics, and it's Coco, right? Is it? Am I remembering this correctly? I gotta look
Coco
on the last panel.
Coco is
Yes.
based off of the actual Coco, who is my parents' dog, and she is the sweetest little thing.
What kind
So
of dog is she? Can I ask?
she's like a pit bull kind of mix. She was a rescue.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
she's like a black and white dog, and she has a little bit of gray up here, even though she's pretty young. And she's a smart girl who just talks to you and wants to be on schedule, have her walks, get some food, pet her. She's a great little girl, and I wanted and in every comic that I create, I always have to have a really cute little creature in it. That's
Hmm.
just rule number one for Emma creations.
Coco is freaking adorable. Like part reindeer, part goat, part dog, part just like I don't know what the hell this is, but if this does well, that's the first thing that needs to have a stuffed animal made. 100%. I would definitely get one of those. But again, thank you so much for making it out here. And for all of those tuning in, make sure you follow Emma on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and go see her at MegaCon. All right. So take care, everybody.